In this lesson, moving forward, I'm going to talk about how to talk to our clusters, right? So in the previous lesson, we created this cluster right here. And in this lesson, I'm going to also demonstrate how to actually go about taking a look at the Kubernetes user interface, right? So not just accessing from the shell using the kubectl command, but also I'm going to demonstrate how to access the interface of Kubernetes so you can actually see what's going on and how does it work and so on. So once we have the cluster created, next step is to describe the cluster. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out of here. Start from the top. So run the gcloud container clusters and then use the describe and then the name of our cluster, which is claydesk-app. Make sure our spellings are correct. And if I hit the enter key, it's going to give me several details, right? A whole bunch of details, in fact. So let's scroll up. Let me show you what this is all about. So as soon as I execute this command, right, the gcloud container clusters describe claydesk-app, what this does, it gives me all details about the cluster itself. So it tells me the IP address, the create time, the master version, other details such as node count, which is 3. There are 3 nodes within this cluster, the versions, the endpoint, initial cluster version, and so on, right? So the time zones, the master auth, and so on. So let me scroll down and find the actual thing that I'm looking for, which is this. So this password and username admin is important, and you must have guessed it, because this is how you would access your Kubernetes interface. So you'll provide a username and the password to log on to the Kubernetes UI. Now let me copy this. So just highlight this, do a Control-C on your keyboard to copy it. Let's scroll down. Let's see what else do we have here. We have our disk size, of course, and then the machine type is NS standard-1, which is fine. We saw that earlier when we created the cluster, in fact. All right, great. So at this point, we've described our cluster. And what we found was the password and the username for us to save it. So I'm just going to, again, copy this, bring up my notepad, and then save it, okay? Or just paste it for my own records. So let's minimize this. All right, let's scroll down. Next, I'm going to go ahead and run the kubectl command. So to get our cluster info, basically, that's what I'm looking for. And this cluster info will give us the ability to connect to the Kubernetes interface. Basically, it'll provide a URL to us. So I'm going to say kubectl cluster-info. Hit the enter key, and this is going to give us several URLs. Okay. So it tells me that the Kubernetes master is running at this IP address, and then of course what I'm looking for is the Kubernetes dashboard. Okay, so this is what I'm interested in, and it's running at this URL. So all I need to do is just copy this URL, and of course bring our notepad. So just paste it in my notepad, and of course I'm going to use a new tab in my browser, and I'm going to use this URL next. So let me go ahead and open up a new tab in the browser. So let's navigate to our new tab within the browser and simply paste this URL, and it's going to try to connect to this, right? And of course it gives you the connection is not private, which is fine. Click on advanced, and then of course click on proceed to this URL. Brings up the authentication required dialog box. It's admin, and of course password is, I'm just going to copy this and paste it here. Click login, and this should take us to the Kubernetes dashboard. And this is Great, because now you'll be able to see the actual UI of Kubernetes, what's going on with our cluster, how are our pods working, services, and so on. So at this point, of course, the workload is nothing. I can click on the all user namespaces and take a look at the kubesystem or the default. And I can explore these areas by going on to these various options and take a look at what this dashboard is all about. And here is where I can deploy the containerized app, or I can click on the dashboard tour to learn more. So let me go ahead and let's click on the dashboard tour, and it'll take me to the Kubernetes guides, and I can of course read about it and so on. But no problem, I'm going to show you exactly how to move forward. So let's go back to our dashboard. Notice there's an option called deploy app, right? Now if I click on deploy app, or I can upload the YAML file, which is simply the serialized file, right, that I can upload. So I can do two things here. So let's click on default, click on namespaces, or I can check out what this kubesystem is. So you'll be able to actually see the different deployments, replica sets, replication controllers. If I scroll down, you'll see pods and so on. Okay, so this is a wonderful way of taking a look at and how Kubernetes is in fact taking a look at your cluster, right? And what pods are already been created, what's running, the CPU cores, and the memory being used. So it gives me the workload of my deployments. So at this point, we didn't deploy anything, right? These are the previous deployments, such as Heapster, which when it creates the Kubernetes or creates the cluster, this is what is already created behind the scenes. And of course the replica sets, and I'm going to talk about more detail about what the replica sets are. And the replication controllers are simply that takes care of pods and containers within those pods. So if one of the containers were to fail, for example, or stop working or gets corrupted, it replicates the other containers so that your app online does not fail. So it's still up and running. And that's the beauty of using Kubernetes. It provides complete management as well as load balancing for your app. Okay. So in this lesson, I just wanted to demonstrate how to go about describing your cluster, getting cluster information, getting the URL for the Kubernetes dashboard, the admin and password, make sure you save those, and then how to access the Kubernetes interface. So once I'm done with this, let's go back here to our shell, and here's the URL for the Kubernetes interface. So practice with this lesson, and then let's move to the next one.